The Grave of the Fireflies features a world that has lost any sense of community, where the social fabric binding people together has completely eroded. This is a film where characters are obsessed about ideas of the nation, ideas about patriotism and honor. And the film is relatively sympathetic toward those ideas, but it displays the country of Japan during the war as being fundamentally unworthy of them. Hannah Arendt talks quite eloquently in both The Origins of Totalitarianism and The Human Condition about the peril of the fundamental links between people, of the sense of having a common history, of having a basic shared sense of experience, breaking down in times of great turmoil and turbulence. And by a common sense of experience, I don't necessarily mean that everyone thinks the same way, but I mean something more than, say, I see a green tree the same way that you do. It's fundamentally the idea that people have a roughly equivalent set of interests and reactions. That, say, if there is a parade going on the 4th of July, for instance, people are going to be buoyant and raucous and chaotic and all dressed in red, white, and blue. And there's a range of experiences. There's, you go full extreme, sing Yankee Doodle, whatever, to being more toned down, more mundane, and just barbecuing, celebrating with family, whatever, just enjoying the day off. But there's a sense of a shared foundation of experience, in the same way that people are generally happy when the sun shines, or when they have a major accomplishment in their life, like they graduate or they get married. Sense of basic community, a basic sense that people are experiencing the world in similar ways despite the manifold differences between them. But in times of crisis, times of turmoil for Hannah Arendt, this sense of commonality, the sense of community, of common experience, breaks down. And so this organic sense of connection, shaped by a common set of experiences, is lost. And instead, people are desperate, people are isolated, people feel themselves dehumanized, and for Arendt, an increasingly mechanistic world that starts to come into being starting in the 19th century. And in the place of this organic sense of community, there is ideology, capital I ideology for Arendt, which is this conception of a community that links people together through their devotion to abstract ideals. Like, the worst endpoint of this for Arendt is fascism or Nazism. The idea that we, the Volk, are one thing, one body, one mass, one heart, acting in unison against this evil, antagonistic force acting to undermine us. It's this extremely binary way of thinking about the world. The strong kind of nationalism is a form of ideology. It's a form of this linking people together, not in an organic and visceral way, but in a way that people flock to because they are desperate, because they have lost this clear sense of identity, because they want something bigger than themselves to commit themselves to gain a sense of order and clarity in their lives. But ultimately that fails too. It has to. And it especially fails during times of war, times of devastation, as Grave of the Fireflies demonstrates. What is eroded here is significant. It's childhood. It's a film where childhood does not exist. That sense of the child is fundamentally lost. Aaron talks a lot about natality, the idea that every individual has the capacity for bringing forth in their being new possibilities and new ideas, that we are not bound to the mores and standards of the prior generation. That, as Arendt puts it, the world is populated by men and not by man. Men as in actual people, human beings who have the capacity to make decisions and create their own paths, instead of this abstract universalist idea of man as this unchanging, unceasing, metaphysical idea that people are inevitably bound to. But that idea of natality is only possible in a society that cares for its children and that tries to have them prosper. When that is taken away, nothing is left but nihilism. Nothing is left but a rotten foundation, and that is fundamentally what Grave of the Fireflies discusses. More than what is present, I think what's most notable about the film is what's absent. As in normal childhood activities, which appear very briefly, even in a time of war, but ultimately, even that brief glimpse of joy is transient. It fades and erodes. What takes its place is mere practical necessity, the desperate will to survive in a harsh world. This is a world that is committed to this idea of ideology, this idea of nationalism, this idea of a sense of pride and honor linking people together. But it fundamentally ceases to provide for the active and genuine well-being of others, and especially of the future of the nation, the children themselves. And what's most remarkable about this film, to me, is how people are not terrible. They're not monsters. Takahata understands that everyone is just looking out after their own interests. War does not bring out the best in people. It does not bring out their most joyous and content sides. The whole idea of Hobbes and those who came after him, including Sigmund Freud, for instance, is not that people are innately vile. It's not that they're going to tear each other to bits the second they're given the chance. It's that there is inevitably, in difficult times, a shortage of resources, a shortage of benefits that are available to everyone. This inevitably drives people into conflict. And so whatever people's ideals, they are going to abandon them because those ideals are only abstract, and they are going to look out for what is most real and most visceral to them, which is their material self-interests. But this is not inevitably going to happen if times get hard, if there is a sense of community between people, if there is a sense of a common history, a common sense of experience, a common sense of values that has been forged between people, then community can persevere in times of stress and in times of struggle and in times of great weakness. But that has eroded in Grave of the Fireflies. That has fundamentally decayed. There is no organic sense of community linking people together anymore. Even the family is not a safe and nourishing structure. The kid's father is in the war. He probably dies. And their mother dies in a horrible bombing. That's not really something they can do anything about. That's not really something anyone can do anything about. But think about the aunt who takes them in but doesn't really care about them. In her mind, she's not a villain. She's simply doing what's practical and reasonable in very gruesome, harsh times. But she fundamentally does not treat them as equals. She does not fundamentally treat them as equivalent and whole members of a larger sense of community, even in the small unit of the family. And if the family breaks down, there's no larger unit that is going to compensate for that. Some people are nicer than others. Some people are cruel. But the Grave of the Fireflies insists that this doesn't matter as much as we might want it to. Yes, acts of kindness are important. Yes, they speak to the goodness that is possible in humanity. But when the fundamental sense of community, the fundamental sense of the bonds linking people together, break down, when people are not sharing the same basic framework of thought, framework of being, when they are not living in the same social world together, but are fundamentally working against each other, fundamentally competing for resources, something has been lost. There is a deep sense of societal failure that the film discusses on a level that is much deeper than the questionable actions of individuals. This is a society that has fundamentally failed to function as a society, that has fundamentally failed to function as a common unit providing for the common good. The state, which in an ideal world would be the fundamental fulfilling of that common good, of the common will and common spirit of the people in an institution, it fails to provide for the people. It lets down those who are suffering. It lets down children, most of all, who did nothing, who are responsible for nothing, and yet who have to suffer. More than a military defeat, what the film suggests Japan suffers is a fundamental breakdown of a national identity, of a cultural identity. There is this skeleton of Japanese nationalism that is called in as something to revere, that it's important to fight for Japan. It's greatly important to live up to the standard of Japanese honor and commitment to militarism and conquest and glory. But these ideals ring hollow, not just because we might disagree with those ideals, but because they are fundamentally in service of a nation state that has broken down. They're fundamentally in service of a culture that ostensibly wants sacrifice for the common good, but in reality, that sense of the common good, that sense of a common experience, a common will, a common sense of a shared history and a shared sense of values between people collapses, and nothing is left but individuals who struggle to provide for themselves, stubborn, prideful, incomplete individuals who make errors. The two kids, even, especially the older brother, he is wrong about a lot of things. He makes a lot of mistakes. Of course he does. He's a kid on one level, but on another level, of course he makes mistakes because everyone is going to make mistakes. You cannot expect people to be saints in a time of social failure, a time where the basic sense of community linking people together in an organic and real way has broken down, and all that remains is ideology. These grand proclamations of the nation state and of national glory and of a shared sacred past linking together all groups of people from all across Japan and a single national spirit. That sense of the nation that itself emerged in response, as Aaron talks about, to the rapid changes of the industrializing world, that emerges in Japan as a result of the Meiji Restoration, starting in the 1860s and really coming into its own in the 1870s and 80s. That breaks down. And there's no local sense of community. None of these old senses of links between the people of a specific town or village or area to replace it. All is gone. There are nothing but these tattered, empty ideals that ring hollow when confronted with the reality of a hollowed, rotting nation that has no sense of itself, that has no positive sense of national identity, that has no positive sense of community anymore. All is broken down and is leaving the most vulnerable, the people who most need the sense of community, the sense of a common fabric linking people together. It leaves those people, these kids, miserable and suffering out in the cold. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this before anyone else. This is a really grim film, not just for the horrible suffering these kids go through, but in the film's depiction of a Japanese society that clings to these ideals of the nation at a time when they've become slogans, when they've completely lost any real meaning and have broken down and offer no real solace. So anyway, tune in soon for the next analysis. We'll be coming soon. Promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.